So welcome to the Australian National University. Welcome to this fantastic corner of our campus where we have the Canberra Cultural Centre, which will be venue today for this very special event, this forum, this EU Indo-Pacific Forum. I'm Rory Medcalf, the head of the National Security College at the ANU. I know many of you, but not all of you, so a big welcome to all of our participants and guests here today. There are too many VIPs and distinguished guests from the diplomatic community here for me to name and mention all of you, but of course our chief guest today, and we're really honoured to have you here, is Richard Tibbels, the European Union's Special Envoy for the Indo-Pacific. But of course this event has been organised by the National Security College in close partnership with the Delegation of the European Union here in Australia, and so it's also wonderful to welcome again His Excellency Gabriele Vicentin, the EU Ambassador here in Australia. Colleagues from the Australian Government, including Rod Brazier, Deputy Secretary, Development, Multilateral and Europe Group in DFAT, and diplomatic representatives not only from our European friends but also from the neighbourhood, including from Fiji, from Solomon Islands and from the Philippines. I'll begin, of course, with an acknowledgement of country, and as our international friends know, it's a custom in Australia to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where we're meeting, and so I will acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. The topic of our conversations today is self-evident at one level. It's about the challenges and opportunities that the European Union and EU countries face in engagement with the Indo-Pacific region, and of course the opportunities for Australia and the EU to collaborate in that shared set of endeavours. This is not a light and happy subject in every sense. There's many positive stories about human development and opportunity in the future that I'm sure we will engage with, but there's no doubt that this is an era of global strategic uncertainty and worse, intense uncertainty, strategic competition, and the repercussions of that are being felt right across the world, including here in the Indo-Pacific. It's understandable, I think, as Australia looks to Europe, that our friends in Europe have extremely pressing strategic challenges close to home. The brutality of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that fundamental affront to the principles of the UN Charter, a rules-based order, and indeed principles of peace in the global system is self-evident. And understandably that focuses minds not only in Europe but globally. But I guess a big part of the conversation today will be about connectivity in every sense, and about how the challenges in one part of the global system are affecting risks and opportunities in other regions as well. And there's so much, as I think we'll hear shortly, there's so much that Australia and the countries of the European Union share, both in terms of interests, but also in terms of fundamental values and principles. Indeed, when you look at the values that underpin our political systems and a liberal democratic approach to life, there's so much commonality that geography should really be dissolved as much as possible in the search for partnership. So a few final words from me before I invite our guest speakers to the stage. Firstly, to note that this is not the first time that the National Security College has worked with the European Union delegation on a forum like this. In 2022, we held the first such forum. I think, Gabriele, when you were in the role of EU Special Envoy. We also have conducted 1.5-track dialogue in Brussels with the European think tank community, and we remain committed to helping governments really on both sides make the most of these partnerships and building out the second track side of that process. The European Union's strategy documents on the Indo-Pacific, I think, are standing the test of time, and I think we'll hear more today about how they're being implemented, about progress and about opportunities to collaborate. It's important to understand, certainly as Australia looks at the challenges of this region and globally, that we're not only thinking in a military dimension, we're also looking at all of the layers of engagement and partnership, development assistance, capacity building, education, technology, and of course dealing with the impacts of the climate emergency, as well as the more, if you like, hard or traditional security issues. So look, the last point I'd make is that the National Security College really stands ready to work with all of you on the agenda that we will articulate here today. I note, for example, that this afternoon one of our sessions is being chaired by a colleague who's actually seconded into the college or sponsored into the college by the government of France. So we are, if you like, keeping our doors open to opportunities to work very closely with experts and partners from Europe. But that's enough from me. It's a great pleasure now to ask you to welcome Rod Brazier from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Rod.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks, Rory, for those introductory words. And I'll just echo the sentiments in the acknowledgement of country. And I'd also like to acknowledge Duncan Lewis's presence. For those who, the few of you who aren't familiar with Duncan, he really is one of our most eminent Australians with an extraordinary career as a soldier, a public administrator and a diplomat, and now a professor at the NSC. So you are very fortunate to have Duncan taking over that new role. I also want to acknowledge the heads of mission from Europe, Pacific and Asia that are here with us today. It's a great pleasure to be here at the National Security College and to provide these welcome remarks. I'm very pleased to welcome the EU Special Envoy to the Indo-Pacific, Mr. Richard Tibbels, to Australia and to the NSC. Richard's presence is testimony to the importance the EU is placing on its engagement with the Indo-Pacific. Richard and I had a good meeting yesterday. He also met colleagues across PM&C and Defence. In our discussion, it was very broad-ranging. We touched on topics such as the ASEAN-Australia Special Summit that was held in Melbourne last week, cable connectivity in the Pacific, and the bilateral architecture in our relationship. It seems needless to say, but the EU is such an important partner for Australia, and we warmly welcome the deepening alignment between us and our shared commitment to overcome the challenges that we both face, that we all face in the Indo-Pacific and the Euro-Atlantic theatres. We warmly appreciate the EU's engagement in the Indo-Pacific, while you are so rightly and deeply preoccupied with Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the terrible consequences that has caused. Australia very much welcomes the EU Indo-Pacific engagement through your Indo-Pacific strategy and the Global Gateway Initiative. I was in New York at the meeting where that was announced with Amina Mohammed from the UN, and we understand the huge commitment of resources that has put forward, and we welcome it very warmly. As recognised in the EU Indo-Pacific strategy, stability in this region matters for the EU as well as for the whole world. Stability in this region has underwritten decades of prosperity and relative peace across our region, but including in Europe. The challenges facing the Indo-Pacific are growing in number and intensity, and the internationally agreed rules and norms that were so hard won and which have helped us achieve this extraordinary prosperity and peace are under pressure. As highlighted in the Australian government's response to the Defence Strategic Review, the Indo-Pacific faces increasing competition across all elements, economic, military, strategic and diplomatic domains, all interwoven and framed by an intense contest of values and narratives. China has been quite explicit. China does not see itself as a status quo power. It is modernising its military at a pace and scale not seen in the world for nearly a century without the transparency we would like to see or the assurances we would like to see about its strategic intent. Tensions in the region are rising. We're very concerned about tensions in the Taiwan Strait, as well as coercive actions in the South China Sea. China has an increasing naval presence in the Indian Ocean, which is raising questions among the littoral states there. And of course, the destabilising effect of North Korea's ongoing nuclear weapons program and ballistic missile launches. We are concerned by increasing strategic intimacy between China and Russia. The risk of competition in our region is spilling into conflict, including through misunderstanding or miscalculation. This is no longer unimaginable. The consequences of major conflict in our region would be catastrophic and global. We have shared these concerns with all parties and asked them to increase transparency. And we encourage the European Union to join in us in encouraging parties to do the same. But we're not just facing competition over primacy between the US and China. It's a contest about the way the Indo-Pacific and the world works. As Foreign Minister Wong has said, Australia wants a peaceful and stable Indo-Pacific in which sovereignty and agreed norms and rules are respected, underpinned by a balance of power that deters aggression and coercion. We want a prosperous and connected region with a system of open, rules-based trade that drives global growth while buttressing economic interdependence. In Australia, we are not bystanders. We are bringing unprecedented coordination and ambition to our statecraft and using all tools of national power to shape the type of region we live in. We are listening very carefully to regional countries and offering genuine, credible, and enduring options that respond to their priorities. We are supporting the leadership of regional institutions, in particular ASEAN, but also the Pacific Islands Forum. We're strengthening our closest partnerships, such as that with Europe, along with our alliance with the US and our strategic partnerships in the region. I hope you all took note of the fact that at the ASEAN Special Summit last week, around the margins of that, we upgraded our relationships with Vietnam and Laos. We're committing anew to helping strengthen the global and regional preventive infrastructure that reduces the risk of crisis and conflict. And we are investing transparently in our defence capabilities. At the same time, we face the existential threat of climate change. And we know that we are very closely aligned with the European Union on this. In the fight against climate change, we are both taking ambitious action to decarbonise our economies. And we are supporting Indo-Pacific partners to meet their net zero transformation goals. I want to note that Australia released its first long-term development policy in more than 10 years, in August last year, in which we commit to stronger action on climate change. It underpins the government's record development investments, delivering $1.7 billion in new official development assistance over 5 years, and a commitment to long-term growth through annual indexation. The new policy is guided by the principles of respect, listening and partnership to respond to the needs and priorities of regional partners. Sustainable infrastructure investment is a key part of advancing our strategic interests. The Australian government is intensifying its infrastructure support to meet the Pacific's need for more targeted financing in line with our partners' priorities. We've doubled the financing cap of the Australian Infrastructure Financing Facility in the Pacific to $4 billion and committed $350 million for climate infrastructure. Australia warmly welcomes the EU's greater focus on sustainable infrastructure through the Global Gateway and the EU's commitment to Pacific Region Infrastructure Facility, PRIF. We see a lot of opportunity to work with the EU in what is a priority sector for Pacific Island countries. In this way, Australia's development program is investing in the economic prosperity and resilience of our region in supporting our interests in an open, stable and prosperous Indo-Pacific. We're also committed to working with our neighbours and with the EU to deliver timely and effective humanitarian assistance when disasters hit. Australia will be launching a new humanitarian strategy this year, focusing on supporting this region and highlighting preparedness, resilience and the importance of international humanitarian law. This is supported by an estimated ODA allocation for humanitarian and refugee response of nearly $500 million. I've touched on the main themes that are front of mind for both the EU and Australia as we work to address challenges in the region. It's very evident that there is alignment across so many issues. We'll continue to work with you and your partners to advance our shared interests. Very grateful to Rory and the team for supporting this important engagement with our European partners as we chart a path to benefit all in the Indo-Pacific. I'm very grateful to Richard for coming all the way from Brussels. If you're feeling jet-lagged, Richard, now you know how we feel when we go to Europe. But thank you so much for being here, Richard, and thanks, Rory, for welcoming us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Rod Brazier. And I think not only an articulation of, I think, the many layers of Australia's Indo-Pacific engagement and the way in which we're seeking to build regional resilience, but I think some very clear touch points there with the European agenda and with the efforts that the EU is making. On that note, it's a real pleasure now to ask you to join me in welcoming Richard Tibbels.
Quick slurp.
Yes. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Huge thanks to the ANU and the National Security College for organising this, and a huge thanks to Rory himself for what he's going to do later on in moderating the event. And thanks to Ambassador Vicentin Gabriele for adding his work to the organisation of this event and for organising a fantastic programme for me over the past 2 days. And Rod, I completely agree with many of the things you say, so I'll try and say something different. But I've had some fantastic talks with the Australian government yesterday, and really has shown a lot of the like-mindedness that exists between us. So I really am delighted to be here in Australia. My visit comes 6 weeks after the third EU Indo-Pacific Ministerial Forum in Brussels on the 2nd of February, in which Assistant Foreign Minister Tim Watts participated for Australia. And my visit coming so soon after that is really intended to underline the message of the continuing and intensifying engagement of the EU with the Indo-Pacific region. And my discussions yesterday in particular showed that we do have a very similar analysis of the global geopolitical circumstances in which we live. Russian aggression against Ukraine is occurring at the same time as uncertainty about the strategic balance in the Indo-Pacific increases. And the broader consequences of the tragic and appalling events in Israel and Gaza show what happens when long-standing conflicts are left unresolved. So it's clear we're operating in a single global geopolitical theatre. And as like-minded partners that see our interests served by a rules-based international order, it should come as no surprise that there's a great deal of synergy in the responses that we bring to these challenges. We both depend on a rules-based international order, and this is why our support for Ukraine is so important. If a country succeeds in flouting the UN Charter and international law on the European continent, it sets a very bad precedent worldwide. So we in the EU are extremely appreciative of the contribution Australia brings to supporting Ukraine and to sanctioning Russia. Likewise, addressing the conflict in Gaza and its implications for the wider Middle East is also essential. And here again, the EU and Australia are active. These two conflicts taken together have made vividly clear the link between security and economics and the impacts of conflicts on the wider world, whether in terms of food security, energy security, or the security of navigation routes for merchant shipping. And central to this is our shared commitment to promote a secure, stable, and prosperous Indo-Pacific. And I don't need to convince this audience, so knowledgeable, of the importance of the region to our joint prosperity and security. And I think the EU now also appreciates its importance. A region producing 50% of the world's GDP, hosting 2/3 of the world's population, and by 2030, it will consume 70% of the world's energy demand. And it's home to some of the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide, as well as states for whom climate change is an existential issue. And this region is also the theatre of intense geopolitical competition. Tensions in the South and East China Seas and the Taiwan Strait are increasing, and at the same time as the actions of the DPRK are undermining the nuclear non-proliferation regime and threatening peace and security. And the stability and prosperity of the region are also threatened by attempts at economic coercion, elite capture, foreign interference, and malevolent actions in the cyber field. So it's plain that the Indo-Pacific is of vital geo-economic and geopolitical importance in today's world. As regards China, Australia's position of cooperating when you can, disagreeing where you must, and engaging in the national interest fits very comfortably with the EU's clear-eyed assessment. China is, for us, at one and the same time, a partner, a competitor, and a systemic rival. China is going to remain a vital economic partner for the EU, as it will for Australia and the rest of the world. And it's clear that many of the world's biggest challenges are only going to be successfully tackled with China being part of the solution. However, there must be a level playing field for economic relations, and aggressive military rhetoric and exercises must be avoided, and international law, and in particular, the UN Convention on Law of the Sea, must be respected. And if we are to succeed in building wider international support for the values that we hold dear, we need to show that we're contributing to the priorities of the countries we seek to engage. So we need to implement our ambition on climate finance and adaptation. And we need to show we are serious about reforming the multilateral system to reflect today's world. We need a well-functioning UN, WTO, and international financial institutions, as they're vital to achieve the sustainable development goals and to tackle climate change. So a productive outcome at the Summit of the Future this year is important in this respect, and I believe that close EU-Australia cooperation here also can contribute to this. And in all of these challenges that I've mentioned, strengthening our partnerships right across the Indo-Pacific are essential. So let me highlight now what the EU has been doing in implementing our strategy since we adopted it in 2021. And in so doing, I'll try and highlight some of the areas where the EU and Australia are already cooperating and where we could cooperate more in the future. So most importantly, the EU has stepped up its engagement with partners right across the Indo-Pacific. We signed the Samoa Agreement at the end of 2023, enabling us to step up our region-to-region dialogue with our Pacific Island partners. We held a summit with ASEAN in December 2022 and signed new partnership and cooperation agreements with Thailand and Malaysia. In South Asia, we've now launched negotiations on a new PCA with Bangladesh. And the EU is now a dialogue partner in the Indian Ocean Rim Association and has decided to join India's Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. So you see right across from east to west, west to east, we're stepping up our engagement. And of course, we're now bringing EU foreign ministers together with their Indo-Pacific counterparts on a regular basis, with the holding of, to date, 3 EU Indo-Pacific ministerial forums. In Brussels in February, we had around 70 delegations right across from the east coast of Africa to the Pacific Islands. We believe that these have highlighted the broad support from our Indo-Pacific partners for the approach taken by the EU in our strategy, namely a broad menu of possible areas of cooperation, which we roll out in a tailor-made fashion to suit the mutual interests of the EU and our respective partners. So beyond general engagement, stepping up that engagement, let me mention a few sectors where we're advancing our cooperation. And let me start with free trade. We're extending our network of free trade agreements with Indo-Pacific partners, already with Japan, Republic of Korea, Singapore, and Vietnam, and now most recently with New Zealand, as well as an economic partnership agreement with Kenya. FTA negotiations are now ongoing with India, Indonesia, Eastern and Southern Africa, and Thailand, and work is ongoing to explore whether the conditions are right for the relaunch of FTA negotiations with other ASEAN partners, and watch this space for announcements in the near future. And we hope that the signature of the Samoa Agreement now will give a further boost to the extension of the EU Pacific Economic Partnership Agreement to include more Pacific Island countries. And once here again, we're hopeful that there will be further countries joining the EU Pacific EPA in 2024. Now, with Australia on free trade, the door remains open. We continue to see the FTA as serving as the interests of both parties, certainly in economic terms, but also in more broad geostrategic terms as well. But in the meantime, we look forward to reaching agreement on a bilateral partnership on critical raw materials, which was envisaged by the EU-Australia leaders meeting in 2022. Secondly, in the digital field, we have digital partnerships with Japan, Korea, and Singapore, an agreement on cross-border data flows with Japan, and we're now negotiating binding digital trade agreements with Korea and Singapore. With these three countries, as well as India, we're working on research on cutting-edge technologies such as advanced semiconductors, 5G, 6G connectivity, as well as regulating AI and online platforms. And there are many areas where the EU and Australia can work together in the digital field. So close dialogue will be important between us as we develop governance structures for high-risk artificial intelligence, on platform regulation, data governance, and cybersecurity. And digital connectivity and its potential, as Rory has mentioned, to promote sustainable development in the Pacific is clearly an area where we should seek to ensure that our approaches complement one another. Australians are increasingly seeing the effects of climate change. And for your neighbours in many Pacific Island countries, this is a real existential matter. The EU is a global leader in the field of green transition, and it's active with partners right across the Indo-Pacific region, with, for example, Team Europe initiatives through Global Gateway with ASEAN, as well as with the Pacific Islands, to strengthen climate resilience, biodiversity, and to promote energy transition. At COP28, the EU and Australia cooperated in the successful outcome, formally linking energy transition to climate action, and we're grateful to Australia for joining the Global Pledge on Renewable Energy, which is in line with your ambitious target to reach 82% of electricity generated by renewables 6 years from now. And we're looking forward to working you further on renewable energy. So in tangible, very tangible ways, the EU's Global Gateway is feeding into the priorities of our Indo-Pacific strategy, boosting green, modern, and resilient investments for sustainable development, from infrastructure to regulatory frameworks in key areas such as transport, energy, health, education, and digital. And we're seeing increasing interest from the Indo-Pacific for the EU's potential for cooperation in the security field. We're developing security partnerships with key partners, starting with Japan and Korea. And High Representative Vice President Borrell has often described the EU as a smart security enabler, a powerful non-traditional security actor seeking to enhance partners' capabilities in the field of cyber, hybrid, foreign interference, counterterrorism, as well as maritime security. And in strengthening our resilience, we need to learn from doing And this makes the increasing interaction and sharing experiences between European and Australian experts in these fields crucial. And an excellent example of this is the ongoing cooperation between experts from ASPI here in Australia and the Helsinki Centre for Excellence in Countering Hybrid Threats. The EU's project, Enhancing Security in and with Asia, ESIWA, is actively building cooperation across all the fields that I mentioned. And Crimario is strengthening partners in the field of maritime domain awareness through its platform IORIS and through the information sharing network called ShareIt. In addition to this, naval deployments are also highlighting the EU's commitment to uphold freedom of navigation. EU Operation Atalanta has proved indispensable to securing the Gulf of Aden against pirate attacks and has now conducted many joint exercises with Indo-Pacific partners. And now a new operation called Aspides has been launched to protect merchant vessels in the Red Sea. In addition, we've established a coordinated maritime presence in the Northwest Indian Ocean to better coordinate the naval assets of our member states in that part of the Indo-Pacific. But in addition, EU member states are stepping up their deployments of naval vessels to the broader Indo-Pacific as well. So a few remarks in conclusion. Our approach is holistic, offering our partners the possibilities for cooperation right across the policy spectrum. And this is for one overarching reason. All of our cooperation across the 7 areas highlighted in our strategy is designed to enhance the resilience of our Indo-Pacific partners. The EU has a clear interest in an Indo-Pacific region where sovereign, independent countries have the strength to protect their national interests. And this is a region increasingly affected by geopolitical rivalries. So whether it's diversifying supply chains, supporting partners in green and digital transitions, building sustainable infrastructure, supporting partners in the capacity to tackle health pandemics, or working with our partners in the fields of security and defense, all of these areas are designed to reinforce our partners' capabilities. And I believe this aligns very, very closely with Australia's objective of enhancing the agency of Indo-Pacific partners in what I describe as the choppy waters of the 21st century. And one final remark, resilience begins at home. And this is why the EU has developed an economic security strategy and has just put forward last week proposals to enhance our defense industrial base. So huge thanks again for the organizers, huge thanks for all of you for listening, and I'm really looking forward to the question and answer session now. Thanks very much.